Welcome to Podcast with AI, where human curiosity meets artificial intelligence. I'm your host, and each episode we dive into thought-provoking topics, explore big ideas, and have real conversations with my AI co-host, who's always ready with insights, facts, and a touch of futuristic wisdom. Whether you're here to learn, question, or just spark your brain, you're in the right place. So plug in, power up, and let's explore the world through the lens of humans and machines. This is Podcast with AI. Today, we're exploring a fascinating topic: how we learn, the psychology behind learning styles. To help me dig into this, I've got a special co-host, an AI. So let's jump in. Hello, what are learning styles and why do people believe in them?
Great question. Learning styles are the idea that each person has a preferred way of taking in and processing information, often categorized as visual, seeing, auditory, hearing, reading, writing, or kinesthetic, doing. You've probably heard someone say, "I'm a visual learner." That's what they mean. Now, why do people believe in them? Well, it feels intuitive. We all notice we remember things better when they're presented in certain ways. Maybe someone remembers directions better when they see a map rather than just hear them spoken. That kind of personal experience creates a strong belief that learning styles are real and useful.
That totally makes sense. But I've also heard some researchers say learning styles are more myth than fact. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, despite how popular learning styles are in schools and corporate training, research doesn't actually support the idea that teaching people in their preferred style improves learning outcomes. In other words, just because someone says they learn better with visuals doesn't mean they actually retain more information when taught that way. Instead, it turns out the nature of the content matters more. For example, learning to recognize faces is naturally visual. But learning a new language? That might require a mix of methods: speaking, reading, listening, and writing. So, it's not about one fixed style. It's about what fits the task.
That's interesting. So it's more about flexibility than labeling yourself as one type of learner?
Exactly. The most effective learners are adaptive. They use different strategies depending on what they're learning. It's less about saying, "I'm a visual learner," and more about asking, "What method helps me understand this topic best?" That shift in mindset can make a huge difference.
All right. So we just unpacked the idea of learning styles and why people believe in them. But what are the actual models out there? I've heard of things like VARK and Gardner's multiple intelligences. Can you break those down for us?
Absolutely. There are a few major models that have shaped how we think about learning styles. Let's hit the big three. First, one VARK model. Probably the most popular. VARK stands for visual. Learners who prefer images, diagrams, and spatial understanding. Auditory. Those who learn best by listening. Reading, writing. People who prefer to learn through written words. Kinesthetic. Learners who like to touch, move, and experience. This model is often used in education to help people identify how they prefer to receive information. But again, preference doesn't always equal performance. Next one is Kolb's experiential learning theory. Now, Kolb takes a slightly different approach. He says learning is a cycle involving 4 stages: concrete experience, reflective observation; abstract conceptualization; active experimentation. From this, he identifies 4 learner types: divergers, feel and watch; assimilators, think and watch; convergers, think and do; accommodators, feel and do. It's a bit more complex, but it focuses on how we process and apply learning, not just how we receive it. And the third one is Gardner's multiple intelligences. This one's less about learning styles and more about different kinds of intelligence. Howard Gardner proposed that intelligence isn't just about IQ or math skills. It's much broader. His list includes linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, bodily, kinesthetic; musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic. The idea here is that people are smart in different ways, and that affects how they learn and express themselves.
I love that, especially Gardner's idea. It feels more human, more personalized. But do any of these models actually work in terms of improving learning outcomes?
That's the million-dollar question. Research has shown that while these models help people reflect on their learning preferences, there's little scientific evidence that tailoring teaching to these styles leads to better outcomes. In fact, the most effective strategies are often things like retrieval practice, spaced repetition, and active learning, which apply across all styles. So, learning style models are useful for awareness, but not necessarily for designing instruction that guarantees results.
Okay, so we've covered what learning styles are, and the big models like VARK and Gardner's multiple intelligences. But here's the big question. Is there any scientific evidence that people actually learn better when they're taught in their preferred style?
Short answer? Not really. At least not the kind of strong, consistent scientific evidence you'd want to base an entire education system on. Here's the deal. This idea is called the meshing hypothesis. It suggests that if you teach someone in a way that matches their preferred learning style, like using visuals for a visual learner, they'll understand and remember the material better. It sounds logical, and a lot of teachers and trainers have bought into it. But when researchers put it to the test, they didn't find solid proof. In fact, multiple large reviews, including a famous 2008 report by Pashler and colleagues, concluded that there's no compelling evidence to support the meshing hypothesis.
Whoa, so you're saying we might be designing entire lesson plans around something that doesn't really help?
Exactly. The tricky thing is, people believe it helps because it feels right. If I say I'm a visual learner and you show me a diagram, I feel more comfortable. But when you test whether I actually learned more, the results don't usually show a difference. Instead, what works across the board are strategies backed by cognitive science. Things like spaced repetition, interleaving, mixing different topics during practice, retrieval practice, testing yourself to strengthen memory, dual coding, combining words and visuals. These methods improve learning for everyone, regardless of their style.
That kind of flips the script. So it's less about how I think I learn and more about what techniques actually change how I remember and apply information.
Exactly. It's empowering, really. Once you know that effective learning is about methods and not fixed labels, you can train your brain to get better at anything.
So far, we've busted a few myths about learning styles and explored what actually works. But there's another concept I keep hearing about: metacognition. It sounds fancy, but what is it really? And what role does it play in learning?
Metacognition. It's like the secret weapon of successful learners. In simple terms, it means thinking about your thinking. It's the ability to reflect on how you learn, monitor your understanding, and make adjustments along the way. For example, let's say you're studying for a test. Metacognition is what helps you realize, wait, I think I know this chapter, but when I try to explain it out loud, I can't. That awareness can push you to go back, review differently, or try a new strategy.
So it's kind of like being your own coach while you're learning?
Exactly. And the best part? Studies show that students who develop metacognitive skills tend to perform significantly better, not just because they're smarter, but because they learn smarter. There are two big parts to it. Metacognitive knowledge. Understanding how you learn best, what strategies work for you, and where you tend to struggle. Metacognitive regulation. Actually planning, monitoring, and evaluating your learning. Like setting a goal before studying, checking in during and reviewing after to see if it worked.
That makes me wonder, can you train your metacognition? Or is it just something some people naturally have?
Great question. The good news? It can be trained. Teachers, coaches, and even apps now use techniques to build metacognition. Things like asking learners to reflect after a task. What worked? What didn't? Using self-quizzing and prediction. How well do I think I'll do on this test? Encouraging journaling or thinking aloud during problem solving. Over time, these practices help people become more aware of their learning process. and that awareness leads to smarter decisions, better focus, and deeper understanding.
That's powerful. It's like learning to learn.
Exactly. Once you unlock that, you're not just memorizing facts. You're building a skill that makes any learning easier.
All right. This has been such an eye-opening conversation about how we actually learn. We've looked at learning styles, what they are, why people believe in them, and what the science really says. We explored powerful models like VARK and Gardner's intelligences, but also learned that how you learn might not matter as much as how well you manage your learning.
Exactly. The big takeaway? Don't box yourself into a single style. Focus on flexible strategies, build metacognitive habits, and use science-backed techniques like spaced repetition, self-testing, and dual coding. Learning is a skill, and like any skill, it gets stronger the more intentionally you practice it.
So, whether you're a student, a teacher, or just a lifelong learner, remember this. It's not about fitting into a label. It's about owning your learning process. And the moment you start thinking about how you think, that's when real learning begins.
Well said. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and don't forget, your brain is way more flexible than any label.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. More brain-boosting chats coming soon.